What if there was a 100-foot truck designed to carry nuclear missiles through the Arctic like it was just delivering groceries? Sounds like something from a comic book or a sci fi movie, right? But these machines weren't fiction, and they came from one place the Soviet Union. Before we dive into the top secret Soviet vehicles you weren't supposed to see, make sure to subscribe, because today we're unlocking the vault on the wildest, most unbelievable Soviet vehicles ever built. For nearly 7 decades, the Soviet Union embodied extremes on every front: political ideology, social structure, and perhaps most iconically, mechanical invention. This was a nation where engineering was less about incremental progress and more about audacious, almost reckless leaps into the unknown. If the West was content with practical innovation, the Soviets sought to break every rule, redefine scale, and challenge physics itself. The guiding principle: if you can't outsmart them, overwhelm them. The world wasn't just a stage for technological competition, it was a proving ground for Soviet bravado. Every design carried a message: strength, dominance, and an unyielding refusal to be second best. The result? An astonishing parade of machines that oscillate wildly between visionary genius and absurd overreach, terrifying in their potential and surreal in their execution. Picture the height of the Cold War, 1957. The superpowers are locked in a tense dance, each revealing more formidable weapons as a threat and deterrent. America boasts the Atomic Annie, a nuclear artillery piece capable of launching a devastating nuclear shell. The Soviets responded with something not just bigger, but bordering on the mythic: the 2B1 Oka. The 2B1 was a gargantuan monstrosity, a hybrid of tank, artillery, and beastly artillery cannon. The gun itself was 65 feet in length, longer than many railway cars, towering over any tank of its era. The shells it fired were 420 millimeters in diameter, weighing an astonishing 1,650 pounds. For scale, that's heavier than a grand piano or an average adult polar bear. One single projectile from this cannon could deliver a nuclear warhead 28 miles, obliterating targets with devastating force. It was, in essence, a mobile nuclear artillery platform, an expression of brute strength and engineering audacity. But such power came with catastrophic drawbacks. The enormous recoil generated by firing such massive shells wasn't just a mechanical challenge, it was a disaster waiting to happen. Each shot ripped apart the cannon's own mechanisms. The recoil tore the gearbox from its mounts, while the chassis of the vehicle often cracked under the immense force. The engineers had to enforce a painstaking 5-minute cooldown period between shots just to manage the damage and reload safety. Despite these flaws, the 2B1 Oka made a powerful statement that the Soviet Union was willing to build machines that defied reason if it meant intimidating the world. However, the engineers learned a hard lesson. Sometimes, sheer size and force don't equal effectiveness. The 2B1 was scrapped, a colossal testament to ambition's limits, but a legend of mechanical madness that made militaries everywhere take notice. Fast forward a few decades, when science fiction was creeping ever closer to reality. While Western movies fantasized about laser warfare, the Soviet Union quietly brought that vision to life in one of the most unconventional tanks ever designed, the 1K-17 Zhaty. This wasn't just a tank with a cannon or missiles, it was armed with 13 massive ruby lasers, each weighing about 66 pounds. These lasers were not mere blasters. They could unleash beams powerful enough to blind enemy sensors, destroy optical equipment, and temporarily incapacitate opposing troops by dazzling or disorienting them. The technology was cutting edge for its time. Rubies were chosen as the lasing medium because they could produce intense, coherent light bursts, a perfect weapon for disrupting the enemy's battlefield awareness and electronic reconnaissance. But reality soon collided with the cold hard rules of warfare. The Geneva Convention explicitly forbade the use of weapons designed to blind humans, a moral and legal boundary that the 1K-17's laser weaponry threatened to cross. Moreover, these ruby lasers were astronomically expensive and delicate. Their maintenance required specialists, and the entire system was vulnerable to battlefield conditions. Consequently, the 1K-17 never went beyond limited experimental deployment. It remained more a symbol of Soviet technological daring than a practical weapon, yet it underscored a critical aspect of Soviet design philosophy. They were unafraid to take enormous risks with unproven technologies in hopes of gaining an edge, even if those risks bordered on madness. In the shadows of the 1930s, as aerial warfare rapidly evolved, the Soviet Union embarked on a daring and visually spectacular experiment, the Zveno project. At first glance, it sounded like something out of a science fiction novel rather than military aviation doctrine. Picture this: a massive bomber aircraft, not just carrying bombs, but literally hoisting 5 fully functional fighter planes strapped directly to its wings and fuselage, piggyback style. These fighters weren't mere decorations. They were combat-ready warbirds, armed and loaded, prepared to launch into battle at a moment's notice. This concept wasn't just an eccentric stunt. It was designed with practical goals in mind. Fighters at the time had limited range and fuel capacity, restricting their operational reach. By piggybacking onto a larger bomber, these fighters could bypass the exhausting long-haul flight, conserving fuel and arriving fresh on the battlefield. Once near enemy territory, the fighters would detach mid-flight in a delicate, coordinated ballet of aerodynamics, dive into combat, and unleash their payload, each fighter carrying roughly 1,000 pounds of bombs for tactical strikes. When deployed in limited operations, the Zveno units were terrifyingly effective. The sheer visual spectacle of 5 smaller fighters peeling off a mothership and screaming into enemy airspace was awe-inspiring and intimidating. It combined the strategic reach of bombers with the nimble aggression of fighters, giving the Soviets a unique edge for a brief moment. But as aircraft technology rapidly advanced, with fighters becoming faster, more efficient, and having extended operational ranges, the Zveno's airborne circus began to feel like a relic. The complexity and risks of mid-air docking and undocking were high, and the logistical burden was heavy. By the time World War II was in full swing, this extraordinary but cumbersome innovation was retired quietly, overshadowed by newer aviation doctrines. Still, those who witnessed the sight of 5 fighters clinging like warbirds to a giant bomber would forever remember it as a haunting aerial poem, a bold Soviet statement of ambition and ingenuity, a fleeting spectacle of war in the skies. If you think you've seen all the crazy ideas from World War II, wait until you hear about the Antonov A-40. It's the kind of invention that seems to have leapt straight out of a mad engineer's fever dream. In 1942, Oleg Antonov, a brilliant Soviet aircraft designer, faced an audacious challenge: how to deploy tanks rapidly behind enemy lines, bypassing the slow grind of ground transport. His solution? Attach biplane wings to a light tank, creating what some called a flying tank. The plan was as simple as it was wild. Tow this tank behind a heavy bomber at high altitude, release it, let it glide down silently, then shed the wings and enter battle fully armed. Sounds insane, right? Because it was. The physics of lugging a tank through the air proved brutal. The enormous drag caused by the tank's bulk slowed the towing bomber drastically. The test flights revealed the bomber had to jettison the tank far earlier than intended, well before reaching the target zone. Despite these landings, the A-40 actually got off the ground, an astonishing feat in itself. The tank landed after a rough glide and survived the fall, but the concept was fatally flawed. Tanks, heavy and armored, just weren't designed to soar through the skies. The Antonov A-40 became a running joke among military engineers, often cited as an example of Soviet ambition pushed to the extremes. But behind the humor lay an undeniable truth. The USSR was willing to try nearly anything to solve tactical problems, no matter how unconventional or risky. Fast forward to the late 1950s, and you find yourself staring at a creature that looks like it crawled right out of a sci-fi graphic novel, the Mi-10. This helicopter was a marvel of Soviet engineering and sheer scale, often nicknamed the flying crane for its primary role. What made the Mi-10 truly unforgettable were its legs. Massive spider-like landing gear extended up to 30 feet high, designed not just to land but to straddle enormous objects on the ground. Whether it was trucks, cargo containers, or even full-size buses, the Mi-10 could hover over them, grip the payload underneath with precision, and carry it through the air. Its lifting capacity was nothing short of impressive, up to 15 tons. This meant it could haul portable buildings, bridge sections, and other massive industrial equipment that no other aircraft could manage. The Mi-10's unique undercarriage platform transformed it from mere transport to mobile heavy lift system. Despite only 55 ever built, the Mi-10 was a workhorse for decades in Soviet industry and military logistics. When it flew at air shows, it was more than a spectacle. It was a testament to Soviet engineering might. Instead of graceful hovering, it loomed large, its long legs casting shadows reminding everyone just how bold and powerful this machine was. Nuclear submarines are among the most secretive and dangerous weapons of the Cold War, but the story of the K-84 Ekaterinburg is one that chills even the most hardened naval experts. In 2011, while docked for routine maintenance, disaster nearly struck. A fire broke out on board, sparked when welding flames hit nearby wooden scaffolding, dangerously close to the submarine's nuclear missile compartments. The fire raged uncontrollably for over 24 hours, threatening to ignite the submarine's 4 nuclear missiles, a catastrophe that could have dwarfed even the Chernobyl disaster. Miraculously, the blaze was contained before triggering a nuclear event, but subsequent investigations revealed something far more disturbing. The submarine's sonar drome, a giant spherical acoustic chamber critical for underwater detection, was discovered to be filled with a flammable liquid, a ticking time bomb on its own. Out of the nearly 245 nuclear submarines built by the Soviet Union, the Ekaterinburg stands out as a near historic disaster averted. Its close call serves as a stark reminder of how perilous the nuclear age truly was, how thin the line was between catastrophic destruction and miraculous survival. At an astonishing 242 feet long, longer than a Boeing 747 fuselage, the Lund-class chronoplane defied easy classification. It was neither a plane nor a ship, but something wildly in between. Built in the 1980s by the Soviet Union, this gargantuan machine was designed to harness the ground effect, a unique aerodynamic phenomenon that allowed it to glide mere inches above the surface of the water, creating an invisible cushion of air beneath its wings. Powered by 8 jet engines and armed with 6 massive missile launchers, the Lund was a sea-skimming predator, capable of speeds reaching 340 miles per hour. Imagine a leviathan gliding just above the waves, too fast and low for radar to easily detect, and packing firepower powerful enough to take out entire naval fleets. It was a weapon designed for surprise and sheer intimidation. This behemoth, nicknamed the Caspian Sea Monster, was the epitome of Cold War innovation and paranoia. The Soviet military envisioned it as a stealthy, fast strike platform that could evade enemy detection and deliver devastating blows to NATO warships in a blink. But the reality was harsher. Only one Lund-class chronoplane was ever completed, and it operated primarily in the Caspian Sea, far from the global spotlight. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the dream died with it. The Lund was abandoned and left to corrode on the shore, a rusting relic that looked like a stranded spaceship from another world, silently narrating a story of ambition, desperation, and the limits of engineering. For a fleeting moment, it was a Cold War nightmare, a mechanical leviathan that hovered at the edge of naval warfare and science fiction. Conceived in the 1970s, the ZVM-2901 was unlike any vehicle before or since. Instead of traditional wheels or tracks, it moved on colossal rotating cylinders, enormous metal screws that functioned like gigantic drill bits. These massive, slow-turning screws could dig into snow, mud, or swamp, literally burrowing their way forward as if the vehicle was a giant drill tunneling through the landscape. Picture this, a hulking armored behemoth crawling laboriously but relentlessly across the bleakest and most inhospitable terrains, bogs, frozen tundras, dense marshes, where no conventional vehicle could survive. It could also float on water, turning the concept of amphibious vehicles on its head. The ZVM-2901's top speed was a mere 50 miles per hour, slow even by tank standards. But speed was never its purpose. Its value was in its utter persistence. Nothing could stop it. It was a mechanical bulldozer, a relentless force of nature that churned through terrain like a nightmare made real. To see it in action was to witness a Frankenstein's monster come to life, a bizarre fusion of tank, boat, and snowplow that defied logic yet demanded respect. Its heavy steel body groaned as the screws turned, an unstoppable slow-motion drill across the earth that you couldn't outrun or hide from. If you saw it coming, you'd better get out of the way, because this monstrous machine was built to conquer land, no matter how brutal or unforgiving. The MAZ series was born in the 1950s, originally tasked with mundane industrial hauling, cement, heavy equipment, or other essentials for rebuilding a war-torn nation. But these trucks evolved into something far more formidable, colossal multi-wheeled vehicles engineered to carry the deadliest cargo imaginable, ballistic missiles. Each iteration pushed the boundaries of size and power. The MAZ-7907, the pinnacle of this series, was an engineering marvel of intimidation. Measuring over 100 feet long and outfitted with a staggering 24 wheels, this truck was designed to haul intercontinental ballistic missiles weighing up to 200 tons. Imagine a vehicle so massive that the driver's cabin was split into separate compartments, almost like a tiny starship cockpit, with two operators working in tandem to control the behemoth. These trucks were not just practical, they were symbols of Soviet military might on frozen tundras, capable of traversing impossible terrain to keep the country's nuclear arsenal mobile, hidden, and ready. They were a terrifying message to the West: we can move our nuclear power anywhere, anytime, and you can't stop us. Only a handful of prototypes were ever built before the Soviet collapse halted the program. But when these MAZ monsters rolled out, they changed military strategy and global perception. They weren't merely trucks, they were mobile declarations of power, slow-moving, unstoppable titans on wheels that carried the weight of geopolitical tension across vast frozen landscapes. These were not merely vehicles, they were statements. Manifestos made of steel, diesel, and sheer audacity. To the West, these machines shouted a chilling warning. Look at what we can build. Don't underestimate us. Don't test our resolve. To their own people, they were symbols of pride, strength, and fearlessness. We are powerful, we are indomitable, and we are unlike any other. Yet beneath the heavy armor and thunderous engines lay a complex truth. Many of these machines were colossal failures in practicality. Too large, too complex, too costly to be truly effective on a battlefield. Some broke the laws of physics, others simply broke down under their own weight. These creations were not built primarily to win wars or run efficiently. They were built to shock and awe, to push the boundaries of possibility, to embody a national ethos where imagination was a weapon and madness is a blueprint. They symbolized a moment in time when the Soviet Union bet everything on technological spectacle and raw force, regardless of cost or consequence. In their towering forms and monstrous designs, we see a mirror of an empire's dreams and fears, machines that weren't supposed to exist. And yet, astonishingly, they did. They were terrifying and remain as haunting monuments to an era where engineering was as much about psychology and ideology as it was about mechanics, reminders that sometimes the strangest machines carry the heaviest messages. Which Soviet monster shocked you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this video with us, and catch you in the next one.